I have a singing bowl that I like to use for focus, and so it makes a ringing sound, which is used for meditation. Have you ever heard these before? Well, we can try it out. I like to use it myself. It helps me focus and reach calm and be present. So what I'd like to do is just to ring this for about a minute or so. And then while we're doing that, I'll kind of guide you, but I'd like you to take that time to just relax and get settled in your body. Just relax your body and take some deep breaths. And um, and go ahead and if you want to close your eyes, you can, or leave them open, whatever's comfortable for you. And just take some slow, deep breaths as if you're just home, finally at home, you can relax. And think about how you'd like to experience your painting session today. Would you like to play around? Would you like to learn something new? You want to just let loose and have fun? And if there's anything you want to let go of, maybe perfectionism or stress or worries outside of class, and say bye-bye to that for now. And continue to take slow, deep breaths. Okay, you can open your eyes whenever you're ready. It's nice. Does that help? It helps me for sure. Because sometimes when I'm getting set up for class, I'm a little bit rushed, and it's nice to take a moment to breathe and get settled in. Thanks for doing that with me. Um, so now we'll get started with this. And actually today, I'm gonna grab some pencils for you so we can sketch this first. I know most of our classes we don't do the sketch, but for this one, I'd like to give you the opportunity to block out where you want to place your trees. If you just want to copy this one that I have here, which is just like my sample here too, you can. But if you want to make up your own composition, you're more than welcome to. My only tip for composition is I suggest that you have varying heights and maybe even widths to give it some diversity and make it look maybe more interesting than if they were all the same height, same size. So I'm gonna go ahead and we'll borrow these for now. And these have the eraser, so feel free to erase if you want to make any changes. And I recommend sketching lightly so that you can remove the lines if you want to later. I'm going to keep this on the side for reference here. And this one, we've got about 5 trees. I think we have enough time to finish all of them. We'll make simple blobs and stuff to fill in the foliage. So for this, we can sketch very loosely. We don't have to fill in exactly the way we draw this. So for this one, maybe I'll just draw like a loose oval right there. I don't know if that's visible. I'm going to draw a bit darker just so you can see it, but for you, I recommend go lighter because it's a sketch. So these simple shapes just help me block out where I'm going to place these trees. And the reason why we're doing this today, and I haven't really done it with our flowers, this is one tree right here. This can be one group. Is because when we do landscapes like this, it's a bit more composition focused. So right now we're establishing, I don't know if I like this blob. We're establishing our composition by putting in um, our basic shapes. Right now I'm just doing a couple of these blob-like circles, oval-like shapes. And I was roughly following what I see here. One tip I have or one tip that most artists follow is to simplify everything first. So we start simple with these simple shapes, and then we can make it more complex as we move forward. So around here, some blobs. I've left some space below for the ground and to put in the trunks and the branches later, which is why we have that space there. And blob is a technical term in my class. I'm going to be saying that a lot. You don't have to copy mine exactly, too. I keep changing my mind about this one. I think I'll leave it like that. You can make your blobs more rough on the edges, too. They don't have to be smooth. And remember to draw lightly so you can easily erase any mistakes. You'll also notice you have a small blank sheet of paper about this big. We'll be using that for testing out colors later. Any questions so far? Yeah, we will test out colors on this sheet before you put them on here. I'll demonstrate that in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add this line. I think I saw you already have that. And then for this trunk and the branches, I'm just going to draw lines, like thin lines instead of outlining them, because we can add the thickness later. This is kind of like my wireframe or skeleton. And since I'm just following this one, I'm going to try to copy what I see. This one, most of these are Y shapes or V shapes with some extra lines added to them for the branches. This one on the left here is a big Y shape and it's a bit curvy. So I'm just going to make a big Y myself. I'll put this here for reference. And it's going slightly to the left, which I think is nice. It's left leaning. Let's make a big Y there. And then you can add branches to your liking, maybe just a few. You don't have to add all of them right now. Those are more of the main ones. And then I'll go ahead and fill in the rest. You can follow at your own pace. Just establishing the main trunk or main branches, so not adding all of the little ones to avoid confusion. This third one seems to be going straight up, so I'll just make one line here. We'll be adding branches to that later. This fourth one is a big V. And this one looks like a couple of trunks, maybe 3 coming out from the ground. Yeah, about 3. There's another V shape there. Okay. Looking good. Okay. I'll give you a little bit more time. It looks like you're still working. Just look up whenever you're ready. It doesn't have to be perfect. These are loose sketches. I'm going to start to lighten mine a little bit because I don't want it to show too much when I paint on top of it. So I'm going to gently. Okay, I've lightened mine. I have a lot of eraser shavings. Okay, Ruth, you can practice this part when you're ready. I'll go ahead and demonstrate it. So this is my test sheet from the previous class. I was just testing out colors on here, so you can see lots of random shapes. These are swatches, which just means small areas of color. And I did this just to see what my paint would look like before I put it on my painting. And this was the small one that I ended up finishing. This larger one was what I did earlier today. So we can either paint in layers where we do the light area first and then dark on top after it dries. That's how you get these hard edges. But if you want something more soft, you can apply the darker color, which is the shadow, while this first lighter layer is still wet. So this one was yellow first. It stayed wet, then I added this orange, which makes these soft edges here. And these ones, the first layer dried first. So if you want to follow what I'm doing, I'm going to be making this yellow tree first, and I'm going to test out some colors to start. So actually this can be set aside, or just you can pull out your test sheet out now. This one's a little dirty, but I can use it. And I'm going to try using this yellow here is kind of like an orangey yellow. I'm going to see if I like this one, so I'm going to pick some up with some water. I'm creating a small pool here. Oh, good question. For this one, I'm using the small one. And I realized for this painting, either the small brush or the large brush works. The smaller one might be easier because it's easier to get smaller details, and you won't have to switch back and forth. So here's my yellow-orange puddle. I'm just gonna make a mark right there, see how it looks, and ask myself, do I like that shade of yellow for this tree? If I think it's too bright, like too vivid, I can dull it with either some white or mix it with the opposite color in the color wheel, which would be a purplish color, or even gray. But I think I like it the way it is. So now that I have a color that I like, I can start placing it on here. My tip for painting these trees is to group group it in shapes. So for this one, I have one large shape here and one here, and then around it, I added these little leaves. The reason why I suggest that is because if you don't group your shapes, sometimes it looks like you have a lot of little ones all over the place, but this helps make it look more cohesive. So I'll show you what I mean. Within my really loose sketch here, and I'm not going to follow it exactly. I'm just going to make sure my tree is about this big. I'm going to start painting some loose round-ish shapes. For this one, it's got this kind of a shape to it. And the nice thing about trees is that it can look pretty abstract and still look like a tree. So they can be painted fairly loosely. Nothing has to be exact here. So there's like a couple of blobs. Maybe something like that. These are my large shapes. And if you're wondering how I'm holding the brush, I'm just making a circular motion like this. And that creates these somewhat rounded shapes here. If you don't want yours to look that round, you could do a different kind of a mark where you're making more straight lines, like this, versus going in a circle. It's up to you. You can test it out on the test sheet too. Yeah. Then once you have these large shapes established, we can add some more detail, like maybe on some edges you just make a few of these little markings to suggest some small leaves. This is just right on the outer edge. And you don't have to do it all the way around. I think on some parts is nice. And then you can also add some smaller clusters of leaves, like this one has some on the upper left that are floating. We will attach them with branches later, but right now they can float on their own. There's a small cluster here. I'm just kind of using the top side of my brush to make these marks. There we go. And you can try pressing your brush and angling it in different ways to make different shapes and marks. I know if you were in a lot of the previous classes, we practiced a lot of wet on wet technique. And with this one, we're doing more layering, so it doesn't matter too much how wet your first layer is, if you're going to wait for it to dry anyway. But if you want to do the wet on wet technique here, you're more than welcome to. That just means that this needs to stay wet, so it's shiny. It's got an even sheen. And then you can add your shadow color directly on top. For this one, I'm going to be using this darker orange. And I'm going to use not as much water so it doesn't spread too much. Oh, this one it's in between this red color and this yellow we just used, and it's across from this very, very dark purple that almost looks black. If you were to count from the green, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 6 color over, starting with that dark green. Now for the shadows, what I suggest is putting them on the bottom sides of your clumps here. So this one, though, you'll see it's mostly on this bottom side right here. And then a little bit right there because I have another clump of leaves right there. So on this one, I'm just going to put it on the bottom side. And if your paper is still wet, you can kind of just drop it in gently like this by dabbing it. If it's not wet, then you'll have more of a hard edge, which is also okay. Sometimes a hard edge looks too harsh to me, so then I'll kind of soften it by making a rounder shape. Okay, that's the bottom edge. And then I can do the bottom. Oops, that's too much water. If you have too much paint in your brush and it's starting to go everywhere, you can dry it by dabbing it on your paper towel. If you have a lot of water, then it will bloom a lot with the wet on wet technique. There we go. So some dark bits on the bottom and then a little bit on the edges. Looks a little bit shiny there. So that's the foliage for the first tree. And feel free to reference this too for ideas in your printout. Any questions on this part? Or is anyone stuck? It's a little bit tricky. Yeah, each one is practice.
Yeah, it doesn't start out the
Oh,
whole.
okay.
It's not just ignoring this until you get to it.
Okay. So this one might dry and then you'll get a chance to layer. Yeah, but I think you did a good job getting this mostly on the bottom side and it's gradually lightening as you move upward. So it looks like this side is shadow. Yeah.
Keep on trying.
Yeah.
It looks like Asia and Europe.
Oh, it does. It does, huh? Yeah. You always see the coolest things inside the painting. I remember one time you said it looked like an eyeball, whatever I was painting. I think it was a sunflower or no, it was another flower. And then I couldn't unsee it after that. Okay. Now then with this next tree, the color I have on here is kind of an ashy color. It's an ashy green. I think in the printout it's more yellow. For that color, you could use just a tiny bit of yellow and water it down to make it light, or you can even mix in some white with it. I'm gonna try mixing the white. Oh yeah, you could try adding white on top of it to give it a different shade. And just as a tip, anytime you add white paint to a color, it mutes it a little bit. It makes it a little bit duller. So if you ever want to duller, so it doesn't look as bright or as vivid. So if you ever want to tone something down, adding white to it is one way, if it doesn't make it too light for you. Black does the same thing as well. So I'll try adding some white to, let's say, this yellow ochre here, which is this kind of copper looking yellow. It's still looking kind of orangey to me. But I encourage you to test it out on your small test paper to see if you like the shade. Usually I'll need to maybe either lighten something or darken it. Right now I want to lighten, so I'm going to add water. Okay, I kind of like that. I'm going to add a hint of green to that. Okay. Then for this next tree, you can follow the same principles. We'll group some clusters of leaves first, and then add the little leaves after. So on this one, I'm gonna maybe make smaller clumps, but more of them fill in this little sketch I have. I've got a few blobs there. Few blobs here. And don't be afraid to mix a lot of paint, because it's better to have too much in your palette than too little. When you have too little, you have to mix it again. Hi, Susan. Glad you could make it today. Yeah, apparently, I did. Thank you. Thank you. I was telling Lois earlier, at first I didn't like it, but then it grew on me. I guess literally also. It wasn't the style I was looking for, but I think it looks really cute. Well, we're painting trees right now. And everyone, oh, you can use my pencil if you like to sketch it in first. It's optional.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you can see what Lois has here. We just did some loose blobs. Loose, I keep saying blobs. Loose round shapes here. So just to figure out how large they are and roughly where to place it. Yeah, just a loose guideline. And then if you want to erase it later to lighten it up, you can, but that's just there as a guideline.
Okay.
Yeah, that was what we did first.
So you just did that. What? You just did that. I did. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. I'm going to practice on this one.
Great. Yeah, we have this little sheet as a test and practice sheet. But so far, I've just been talking about blobs and shapes, starting with larger shapes and clusters, and then adding little tiny leaves to the edges for some detail, which is what I'm doing right now. So I've got a cluster of different shapes here, and now I'm adding little leaf shapes to some of the edges. We're gonna add the trunks and the branches towards the end after we finish these layers. Susan, let me know if you have any questions while we're working on this. We have a small class today. For this one, I'm gonna let it dry before I add the shadows. So while that dries, I'm gonna move on to my next tree. Feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have any questions or if you get stuck. It's very easy to get stuck with watercolor. I'll just keep explaining what I'm doing for anyone who's curious. And I'll keep checking in on you. Now this next color, I have something that's like a brownish red. So I'm gonna use this brown. Mixed with some black actually. I'm using black to dull this brown color that I'm using. I'm gonna test it out on here. It looks nice. Okay. This third tree, I'm making it overall more of a triangle shape or the oval that I painted earlier. And I'm leaving some gaps in between in the middle, but mostly not much. The more white gaps you have and the bigger they are within your tree, the less full it will look. So if you want it to look more full, then you can fill in more of your shapes to make it look more solid. If you want it to look more sparse, then you can leave lots of white space and make smaller marks instead. And it's really hard to go wrong with trees. All you need is a couple of shapes with some, like a trunk and some branches underneath. So again, here I've painted my main large shapes, and now I'm adding just a few marks to suggest some leaves on the edges. Let's see. Keep moving on here. And then always feel free to experiment with the colors. You don't have to stick to one color or shade for each tree. Maybe you have some trees that are two different colors or shades. Maybe it gradually fades from yellow to a slight orange or brown. Maybe the top can be one color and the bottom can be another. And this sample printout is just for ideas. The one on the image on the left is kind of what I'm copying, and then the trees on the right are just different variations of trees. You can get some ideas on where to place the shadows or where to place little leaves, or get the overall shape if you want to use any of those. Big blobs. I'm making my blobs with kind of rounded edges by painting in a circular motion. If I were using a pen right now, you would see a lot of round scribbly lines. That's how I'm moving my brush. On this tree, I'm allowing it to blend with the one next to it a little bit. I like the effect, so I'm going to go ahead with that. If you don't want it to blend, make sure you let that the tree next door, let it dry first. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm moving kind of quickly here. I don't expect anyone to be going this fast. I'll pause after I put down this first layer. Okay, here's another large shape, large cluster. Large clusters with little marks on the edges to suggest the leaves. Little leaves. And I'm not adding these little leaves on every edge, then it might look too uniform. I'm trying to make it look a little bit more organic by doing it on some of them. And you can even let some of these leaves float in the air. They don't have to be attached. Lois was saying that this looks like a map on the left side. And that's an approach you want to try, to pretend you're painting a map or some islands. That might make a really unique painting. It's a fun way to think about it. Okay, I'm gonna fill in my last tree here. I'm gonna let that dry a little bit. Okay, let's see if I can keep this here for reference. Yeah, sometimes that happens, but once you put on some shadow, it'll cover up some of it. Yeah, looking good so far. Nice, Ruth. Oh, I see you're using the wet on wet technique there to get it to blend.
I can't quite see. Okay. This one looks like a pineapple. It's hard to fix it.
That one, I think once you add some shadow, it might help.
Okay.
Can you
Keep
add
on adding until I get somewhere.
get somewhere?
I keep on adding until I get to look better.
Oh. Yeah, sometimes that's what it takes. I think we're ready for the shadows. So the shadows are essentially the same color but darker, and you can do that just by using less water when you mix the color. So you can, what you can do is mix the same color you mixed earlier, but don't use as much water and have more pigment. So on this one, I actually forgot what I used. I'm gonna try to see if I can mix it again. And I'm gonna test it on my little sheet before I put it on my painting. Yeah, test out your colors on here. If you don't want to put it directly on here yet, and you don't know how it looks, and put it on here first. And it doesn't have to be a lot darker for it to show. You can even test on top of your previous marks to see how it would look as a shadow. I think I still need to make this a bit darker. For this second tree's shadow, because it's kind of like a beige color that I made, I'm gonna make the same color but add a little bit of gray. So this is yellow ochre with some gray. I think that will do it. Let's try this. And again, the shadows, I suggest putting them on the bottom side of your trees. You can start with the very bottom, and then if you have clusters of leaves like I do here, they can go on the bottom of those clusters. You can kind of also just dab it like this if you want to start with small marks. I think I made it a little bit too dark. I'm going to add some water and then squeeze out excess water by rubbing it on the edge of the palette here. If I have too much water, I just end up with a big puddle on my painting. I'll make sure I don't have too much paint in my brush too. So bottom edges, some shadow. But mostly on the bottom of the whole tree. And I'll continue to do that for each of the trees. So like on the third one, I'm gonna mix the same color but less water. I had used this light cinnamony brown with some black. I'll mix that again. There we go. I should have tested it on there first. Okay. Shadows on the bottom side of the clumps. You can start small and add as you go if you're not sure how big to make the shadows. And I think adding some of these darker marks to the outer edges of the trees also makes them look like they have some volume. So bottom and then sides a little bit is the way I would go. And I may have made this one a bit too dark. We'll see once it dries. One thing to remember about watercolor is that it always dries a little bit lighter and a little bit duller, usually, than how it looks when you first put it on the paper. Okay. These kind of look like clouds in a way, like colored clouds. That's another way to think about it. They look like clouds in a way. Yeah, depending on how fluffy you make them. So these can either look like countries or clouds or trees. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right now they just look like cotton balls, cotton candy. Okay. I'm gonna try to make not put too much detail here to make sure that we finish on time. Some of these shadows can just be larger marks. I'm doing the same thing to every single one, so shadows on the bottom side. Okay. I'm gonna demonstrate the trunks and branches in a moment after I finish the shadow. This one's got a big one. Got to charge my laptop. How are we doing? Ooh,
I don't know. I've just got blobs all over.
well mine, yeah, mine are blobs too.
The blobs are prettier.
Oh, thanks. I think mine are just a bit more rounded. That's
Yeah.
the main difference. Oh, I see you're doing the circular motion. That's good. I think if maybe if you hold your brush at more of an angle like this,
Oh,
it might help with
okay.
making sure it's more
Yeah.
consistent. You can practice on here too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good start.
That's all right. It's my tree, right?
Yeah,
It's my tree. I can use it. It's how I want.
yes, you can. And it's made with your hand and your eyes, your brain. Okay, looking good. So no one has any questions? Okay. This is good practice, everybody. Yeah, it's always practice. Every painting is practice. That's what I tell myself to take the pressure off. Okay, I'll go ahead and show how to do yeah, the trunks. If we don't do the trunks, these are just going to be floating blobs. Okay, so the trunk, I'm going to be using this dark brown that's right next to the black. And I'm not going to make it very dark. I'm going to test it out on my small sheet to make sure it's not too dark, because if it's really dark, sometimes it just makes it stand out a lot, which I don't want here. I just want it dark enough. So with that brown, I'll test it out on here. And I can even compare it to the colors I was using previously. I just want it to be a little bit darker. I think this is a good shade for me, so I'm going to stick to this brown. And I'm gonna trace the lines that I drew earlier, and then make them thicker as needed, using also just the tip of my brush as much as I can to keep it thin. To do that, I'm gonna hold this brush at more of a 90-degree angle, so it's like this, um, relative to the paper, almost straight up. If that's too hard, you can also tilt it a little bit. I'm gonna just gently trace this here. Doing this can be a little bit tricky, so don't be too hard on yourselves if it's a little bit wobbly or some parts are thicker than you'd like. Brush control is a whole thing to practice. And in general, it's easier to make smoother lines if your bristles are following the line that you're making. So if I'm making a line going this way, it's easier to hold it this way versus this way. So your bristles should be following the line that you're painting. In this case, my bristles are facing right, and I'm making a line towards the right. Doing it this way, I get all of these raggedy edges because my bristles are kind of against the line. So the line of your bristles should follow the line of your painting. Sometimes that means turning your wrist a little bit, but that can also be challenging. So you can also turn your paper instead. Like I could turn this way and follow this line like that. Then I don't have to twist my wrist in strange angles. Sometimes it's just a matter of turning your fingers too. You can try all kinds of things for how to hold your brush. Let's see, just for this one, I'll go this way. Also, generally, it's easier to hold your brush steady if the side of your hand is resting on the table instead of floating in the air. It's a lot harder to make a steady line when your hand is floating, especially if you have shaky hands, which I do. And so after I've traced my lines, I'm also adding just a couple of branches to each part wherever it seems nice. I'm also kind of just copying this here. You can go ahead and try the same thing on your trees. I think as long as your trunk is thicker than your branches, it will look overall a bit more realistic. And the trunk doesn't have to be much thicker, just a little bit helps. And right now I'm also adding some branches in front of my foliage. So I noticed some in the picture that are like that. That's optional. But you can also be adding branches in the white gaps if you have any. Or if you don't have any, you can paint straight on top. So tracing my line and then adding extra branches, making the trunks a bit thicker, and testing out my paint on this test sheet whenever I need to. Mm. I've done that too. Yeah, editing is key. It takes practice to know when to stop too. When I was in art school, I had an instructor. I think one time I asked him, like, what if I make this and I don't like it? And then he would say, just make the next one better, or just do something different on the next one. With some of my homework assignments in art school, I'd give myself a chance to do it twice. So if I didn't like the first one, I would just make adjustments for the second one. And usually I would figure out what to change and then make a better second one. Yeah. Well, if you're familiar with, I think maybe the vocabulary of the art and exactly what needs to be changed, you can usually, I think if you can look at it and you don't like it, then you can figure out, okay, why don't I like it? Is this part too big or is it too colorful? Like, I think sometimes if you take that time to do it, you'll see, yeah, how you would do it over the next time. Yeah. The bottom, we will add the ground. Actually, now is a good time to do that since we have a couple minutes left. So I have a line right here, and in this picture there are some bushes in the background. And then in my sample here, I just added a couple of grasses using orange. So we can do the same thing there. I use this same or similar orange to what I use for the shadows here. So for that, that's like this middle orange color right across from the purple. And you can even just make a few lines across like so. Let me try to keep this here for reference. And I'm leaving a couple of gaps just to give it some variation. Maybe a little bump right there for a bush. Another few bumps here. And then some parts you could make some little strokes for grass. I'm kind of flicking my brush up, just using the tip here. This can also be done in clusters as well. A few clusters of grass here and there. And then on the very bottom of my little example here, you'll see I have some texture. This is dry brushing technique. Let me show you how to do it really quickly. So all you need is some color in your brush, but not too much water. And you have to hold your brush at this angle against the paper. So it's almost flat against the paper. And if you just lightly press across, it'll only be painted on the texture that's raised on your paper. So this is what rough paper is good for. You can get the texture of the paper on here like this. If this were smooth, we wouldn't be able to do that. If your brush is too wet, let's say mine is loaded with water right now, then it's gonna fill all the way in. So you gotta make sure your brush is dry enough. To dry it out, you can just dab it on the paper towel or squeeze the excess water by rubbing it against one of the ridges in your palette like this. And I'd recommend testing it out on here first before you try adding it to your painting. Since I have it now, I'm gonna go ahead and just lightly brush against the surface like this. Actually that's a little bit too light. I'm gonna use more paint. This is dry brush. Oops, okay, that's too wet. I should have tested it first. Okay. That's about it. If you'd like to take some time to add the sky color too, you can. There's a little bit of blue, a very light blue, and some spots in the sky would probably do it. So I'm gonna make a blue that's very watery. Try this out. I hadn't done it on my other samples. I'll just paint around the edge right here. Just this is also a loose shape. It doesn't have to fill the whole sky. I think some. I am using this one right here. I think yeah, I think either one of these is fine. They're very similar. Yeah, not too much. This one is. That blue is more towards the center of the whole palette. And I'm making it very, very light here because I don't want it to stand out too much. Just making some light marks back here. Of course, you can make it as dark as you like. I'm gonna make mine lighter. And then that would conclude our painting for today. Ta-da!